Quantum Gaming Tech Workshop. Explore the power of Web3 and gaming.
My name is Oliver De Bono. I'm the CEO at Quantum Gaming. And I'm here today to talk about kind of like an elephant in the room that, a lot of people come up to us as a platform provider. And the first question is, they say, I want to build a crypto casino, okay? And that kind of word is a little bit of a buzzword. If you look at the market today, the concept of a crypto casino is very vague. Do you mean a Web3 casino, or do you mean a casino that is crypto-enabled? So what we're trying to tackle, or what I want to talk about and really explain to the market, is the fundamental difference and what we're trying to do to bridge that gap. So there's a lot you can do with the casino market today. What we're talking about right now is enabling crypto or Web3 features in a Web2 world. The fundamental rule or the fundamental limitation you have with Web3, even though it is certainly going to be the future of gaming, is regulatory issues. And I think a lot of people don't realize that the moment you decentralize your player database, then automatically you start falling outside the scope of regulation. Why? Because who owns the database? Where does it get stored? There are means today where you're getting offered by certain regulators who are opening their eyes to this market and saying, okay, look, if you put a copy of it, then we may be able to obviously authorize those kind of transactions. But ultimately, the concept of regulated governance and decentralization are somewhat opposites. So what we decided to do, I'll just jump into this a little bit more in detail, is looking at an approach where we can, let's say, complement Web3 features in a 2D world, a Web2 world. Basically, the logic over here was to create an ecosystem that is Web3 friendly. What does that actually look like? So a lot of casinos and gaming companies today, not only casinos, but also video gaming, are creating your pay-to-play, your free-to-plays, and creating a sense of a tokenized economy. Now, we knew that we couldn't do that purely in a world where most game providers themselves are regulated. If you go onto a casino or you go onto a sportsbook, you want to be able to place a bet or spin a round on a slot game. If the slot provider themselves don't accept the token that you've created, then by default, the player can't play. So the moment they go into their account, they switch the game on, they're going to find zero balance. So the first generation of casinos decided, okay, let's use an intermediary currency. What does that mean? I land on a casino, I can deposit whatever crypto I want, and as I go into a game session, I'll automatically see dollars in my account. We decided to take a little bit of a different approach to this. My goal here was, how do we create that element of rewards within the token economy without stepping outside of the regulatory zone? So as a platform provider holding 3 licenses, what we decided to do is, let's target one objective. How can we give rewards in a native token? What does that look like? Firstly, I want to be clear, we don't create the token. We offer our clients the ability to create their own token and then define a value. Now, that might sound a little bit wild. Obviously, you want to create a realistic value. We're not going to create, a token worth X amount on the dollar. It wouldn't make any sense. It also needs to be in balance with the rewards you're going to give. So what we did over there is we created a simple concept. I don't know if any of you know about casino rewards or the way VIP systems work, but basically the rule of thumb is that you would create a simplified multiplier, meaning for every $100 you deposit into a casino, I'm going to give you $1 back as a reward, okay? So the idea behind it, of what we decided to strive to do, is to create that ecosystem where a casino can come to us, or somebody who wants to launch a casino can come to us, and then we'll tokenize their reward system. Once you create this ecosystem as a reward, then you apply a value to it. So $1 equals 1 cent of your native token. You then start building around this token. What does building around it mean? There's a lot you can do. Once you've created that ecosystem, you can very easily build a reward that is in balance to that ecosystem. So what does that actually look like? A player comes in, they do a $100 deposit, they get whatever, $1 value in that particular token, and then you decide how you want that to work, whether you want that individual to hold on to that token, and the longer they hold on to that token and the greater their balance of said token is, the more rewards you can give them. So a lot of casinos today have VIP programs, and the higher you rank up in the VIP programs, the more rewards you accumulate. So it becomes a little bit of a snowball effect. This was our aim. Our aim was to create an ecosystem that was Web3 friendly, that the players can actually take those tokens outside of the casino and into whatever crypto wallet they felt was more relevant. So this is a little bit the subject we're on today. It's not going to be a very, very long workshop, but I want to just explain the logic behind it and the restrictions within the kind of regulated market. So moving on to that, we decided to start building particular features that synergize the two concepts that we were looking to merge, Web2 and Web3. The idea behind it, as I had said before, is to create a reward system that goes outside of the casino. Now, once you start thinking bigger and you look at larger ecosystems like larger platform providers, then the token starts becoming more relevant. What happens then is I can take that token out of Casino X and then initiate rewards in Casino Y. So you're starting to bridge the gap between two brands utilizing what would be a platform native token across multiple brands. So this was our aim a little bit, and we wanted to focus a little bit more on the reward system, as even though the Web3 space is definitely the future for gaming. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Web3 casinos. There's been a few attempts. I know, Gordon, you've been in the business since day one, and we've had this conversation a lot. Okay, fair, day two. But basically what we're saying here is one of the biggest issues you have in the Web3 space is not only the limitations of regulation, but it's actually a speed problem. So back in the day, we're talking, what was it, 2019, the Malta Blockchain Summit. Gordon, I remember you there. We had a hackathon there. And we attempted to get some of the best blockchain developers in the world to create an RNG based on a particular chain or network. The issue you have with that kind of system is you're creating a very unique environment and an environment of trust. Ultimately, that's what blockchain is about, the transparency. So we took those elements into the gaming space. We developed slot games, or attempted to develop slot games that operated within those chains. And as what we call bet and win package was concluded upon, then you have a result, and that result is transparent. You can now verify that the RTP of that slot game is real. But what is the negative of running on chain, right? Speed. If you look at the average slot game today, is you do have opportunities where you can go quite a lot faster than we did 4 or 5 years ago, but you still have certain limitations. The second limitation, again, we go back to regulation. So wherever you look at the requirements of the Web3 space, you're always going to hit that regulation stumbling block, which is something that a lot of companies have been trying to tackle. But ultimately, there are regulators out there that if they can't verify in a centralized area that that RTP is actual and the data, the spin, is held there, then you fall outside of the regulatory space. So even though there are some fantastic casinos in the market today that are moving in this direction, they are creating transparency, you are limited. You're limited simply because you're falling outside of the regulated space. And the moment you do that, then what is the trust factor from a player? If I go to a casino and I don't see a Curaçao or an MGA or even today an Anjuan logo, then I might think, okay, I'll never get paid out from these guys. There are good casinos in the market that are purely Web3. What does this mean? They stay within the Web3 environment. There are no fiat transactions in a lot of casinos coming into the market today. Fantastic brands, no criticism whatsoever. There are also hybrid versions of those casinos. So just moving on, when we understood that the Web2 environment will still continue to grow, we decided, okay, let's not go purely Web3, let's not build on-chain, let's integrate to on-chain features. So we had a very unique mission. It did take us a long time, but we finally managed to integrate to several crypto wallets. And I'm not talking about a simple integration like a custodian integration, because those are quite easy. There's tons of payments companies out there. There are fantastic brands, like CoinsPaid, who are probably the trailblazers when it comes to crypto payments and gaming. But what we wanted to do is to go directly into those crypto wallets. So what was happening? We were creating a VIP program that, based on every either deposit, turnover, or VIP level created, we would simply ping that wallet stating there will be a transfer of X, smart contract created, this player has passed X amount of the requirements for the VIP program, and that player would actually receive that native token. So the VIP program started becoming a little bit more of a decentralized venture. You can then use those funds inside of the casino to purchase a bonus program or possibly convert to fiat. So there's a lot of options you can do once you're in the casino platform ecosystem. Basically, there's not really any rules when it comes to what you want to give a player, but you are limited in regards to where they can take that. So if I decide to top up one of my players with, I don't know, 10 Bitcoin, I'm just thinking out loud, or give it as a reward, that player always has the option, to withdraw those funds, yeah? But in a tokenized VIP or reward system, traditionally, that didn't happen. My reward stayed in the casino. Many casinos today are actually moving away from this system simply because the rewards are quite linear. And there's been quite a move, as I said before, of some of the larger brands in the industry moving in this direction. It's created a very unique, let's call it, trust factor. But it's also another question that came out of this was, do I want to send my players, give them a reward that can be used on other casinos? Obviously, as a platform provider, that makes sense. But as a white label provider, you didn't want to do that. Why would I give you a reward you can then use on my competing casino? So we started to see an uplift in casinos or white labels wanting to create their own token. And this started increasing the workload for our development team because everybody wanted to use their own wallet. But the goal behind it isn't to focus on what we've done, it's to explain the difference and the regulatory issues between the two. The gaming market today is bigger than it's ever been. There are new regulators coming out of the market literally every other month. We have some fantastic new goals now for 2025. And the crypto space has literally become one of the largest and fastest growing spaces within the gaming market. I think everyone in this room has heard of the likes of BC Games, Stake, Rollbit. These are all extremely progressive brands operating within the Web3 space. So how do we capture that data and then maintain a regulatory position, but also somewhat centralized? So this was our goal, and this is what I'm simply talking about today. Lack of, let's call it, insight. One of the other issues that we've noticed when it came to the regulation of casinos, Web3 is pretty new. And I think everybody in this audience has heard of rug pulls. A lot of tokenized casinos today, they go about it the wrong way. Basically, what does that actually look like? So I'm not sure if you guys have heard of any pre-tokenized casinos where basically what they do is they ask people to invest through the token and then they eventually launch the casino. This happens a lot. Gordon, we've spoken. Yeah, exactly. So we don't need to go into the Howey test, but I remember having this conversation about 3 or 4 years back. Basically, as Gordon just jumped up and said, you're not really creating a native reward token, you're creating a security. So whenever you see a casino going, oh, buy the token now and I'll give you a reward later, or the token itself is going to increase in value, then you're falling into the security zone. You've got to be careful. I would say, my honest opinion, 90% of those operations are just going to be a rug pull. You're investing into an idea that may never come into fruition. So that's why the reward ecosystem should actually come after the casino's all established. Why? Because you want to see that the product is ready. It's like buying a house on plan, but you never actually get the house. So this was the issue we had with pre-tokenized casinos. Now, the other issue we had with it was, if you're focusing purely on the reward system, what other features can you bring into the market? I don't know, I'm sure many of you heard of the original Moon game, which today has been replicated 100 times over, very populated, especially with Ethereum holders. Today we have variations of those called crash games. So the idea behind it was creating a gambling transparent effect where you could actually verify that the RNG taking place was real. So what we're now trying to achieve is centralizing a database that can be regulated and verified by a regulator, which means the player themselves are protected, but integrating as many Web3 features as there are in the market today, whether those are unique wallets, Web3-based games, and a sense of transparency. So I'm kind of circling back to my first topic. The idea behind the concept of a crypto casino is still far and few. There are very good products in the market out there, but we're not 100%, let's say, there yet. So moving forward, guys, please also the slides, they're more generic information. My role here is just to give you a bit of a brief on what we're doing and what we're interested in doing. Moving on just a little bit, I think we come into the same subject, and as Gordon said earlier, it's a case of blending user experience and compliance. One of the biggest issues we've seen in the past with the crypto casino concept were delays, slowdowns, and outside of the regulatory zone. Compliance and security is a must. Now, a lot of people will argue that you are more secure in a decentralized space, but then ultimately the question comes around, like, who is responsible? Who is responsible for the player? Who is responsible to the regulator? Can you truly create a decentralized casino? Another project we took on, which was quite interesting, but again, it's a hybrid version. We integrated our casino engine into several metaverse projects. Now, there was a big hype of metaverse about 2 or 3 years ago. It seems to have died down somewhat, but the elements remain. So what would happen? We integrated it more as an interface than actually creating a Web3 game. What does it look like? Somebody enters the metaverse. I don't know if anyone's played Sandbox or any other products of a similar nature, but the idea behind it was you enter the metaverse, and as you move towards or inside your metaverse, you can actually trigger a regulated casino to appear. But there is a little bit of a caveat with that. If that casino appears inside the metaverse itself, then again, you've immediately fallen outside of regulatory requirements because the IP or the domain you're interacting with the casino on is not listed by the regulator. So the only way around this was you could either run a proxy, so you're actually pulling that data back towards your platform, or you simply guide the player outside of the metaverse temporarily. What we decided to do is we pulled an iframe. So an iframe would actually come up and display within the metaverse itself. It looked really good. It looked really clean. So you had this little character running around, and it looked like he was looking at a cinema screen, and you could interact with it. But the iframe itself was actually pulling our domain name. It was the only way to verify how to get a Web2 environment regulated in a Web3 space, because if your IP doesn't match, the games won't work. Your payments won't work. Most of the banks will decline immediately, especially if you're going, in that case, for a fiat deposit. So we then decided to take it a step further. We connected the wallet directly to the Metaverse wallet, which was a much easier thing to do. And we simply applied a conversion between their native token and the token within the casino itself. We did 1 for 1. So if you've got 50 native token, whatever it's called, we just applied $50 into the casinos themselves. So the moment the players opened those screens, they automatically saw that they had $50 in their account, which was fantastic because now we removed the initial two problems of payments and gateways. So it was now gone. But again, these are only concepts that I'm talking about today that are explaining where the market is right now and where Web 2 and Web 3 integrate. So there's a lot of potential, and I've seen even during the show here that a lot of casinos are moving towards this space in an attempt to gain transparency. But there's also a very important notion that I think people need to understand, that if it's not broken, don't fix it. There aren't many issues with the platform market today. as long as your software is, let's say, up to date, modernized, or modular, there's not really a need to change it. The only, let's say, target we found for the blockchain market was that people wanted more transparency. I think the number one question we had in gaming was, can I verify this is real? Anyone who's ever played on a casino goes, they come in, they put 100 euros in, they spin 3 or 4 times, and they go, they're cheating me. This is not real. This is a fake RTP. I felt it myself. It's like, how is it possible when you're meant to have a 95% RTP on a game and you put $100 in, that you've lost all your money in seconds? So this is where blockchain really kicked in, and this is the current future of blockchain development within the gaming market, where that layer of transparency is coming to the market, where a player can see the verified RTP. Stake do this quite well. I think Rollbit's going in this direction as well. But the whole point of today's, let's say it's more of a speech than a workshop, but I'd love to take some questions soon, is the fact that there are elements where Web 2 and Web 3 cross over, but some of them aren't needed. I don't believe today, and anyone here can correct me if I'm wrong, that there's actually a need to build a casino on a Web 3 space. I think due to certain limitations, due to regulatory limitations and speed limitations, the Web 2 platform will continue to exist. It will continue to prosper. With new technology coming into the market, things will only get better. And our target right now is to integrate as many of those Web 3 features into the Web 2 space as possible, while remaining compliant. I know Gordon will want us to be compliant and not go into those directions. But look, so basically from my side, I wanted to give this quick overview. I think my main points or closing points over here is regulatory compliance, ensuring that your product stays within the regulatory space, and enhanced user benefits. I mean, that's ultimately the goal, right? You want to give the user more access to transparency, tools, and so on. So with that, my workshop, pretty straightforward, but before I start running down, I'd like to ask if the audience have any questions. Anything? Okay, here we go, Gordon.
Here with the mic, if you need.
It's not really a question. I want to compliment you on the iGame, sorry, not the iGame, the iFrame solution. That's an interesting, innovative integration of Web 2 and Web 3, and a good solution to maybe the geolocation/IP issue. How did you, was that a flash of lightning, or did you go through some other ideas, or how did you end up on that? That's very, it's almost like having a portal within the game.
I need this mic. So that was actually a really painful thing to come across. The iframe itself was an idea we came up very, very late. The issue with it was quite simple. We ran a multitude of integrations. We kept trying to have the game display in Metaverse. Ultimately, it doesn't work. The moment you load that game into that environment, then you've got an IP conflict, and it simply won't work. So we just took a traditional approach like we do with sportsbooks. So we integrate multiple iframes. The good thing about it, and it's not really something I should be saying on stage, but you can run a proxy into an iframe. So you're simply stating, you're pulling that data into a centralized point, and then the company that's actually giving you the data sees your location before the metaverse is. So it's kind of a workaround. Is it the ideal workaround? It doesn't look as clean. So that's the problem with iframes. You need to build around the environment you're in. But the iframe concept has existed for the last 2 decades. Widgets, sportsbook, everything operates within an iframe space, and it's a very good tool. I said it before, if it's not broken, don't fix it. So it was a solution for us, and we did discover it quite late after a lot of work trying to directly integrate into their system.
And I'm just going to nerd out on you for a second. Did you ever think you were like doing micro VPNs or Ajax or?
Basically, the initial round, we had to do that. There was no alternative. But again, it really depends on what products you're working with. There are some products in the market today that they don't do IP checks. But if you're doing IP checks, that's when you need to get a little bit innovative. It is a lot of work. But it is the way forward. And as my last panel, I don't know if I have any more. Sorry, guys. My team put this together for me. OK, here we go. Just going on to this super quick. The idea behind it was creating better user experience. So everybody today, or any young player within the casino field, knows that crypto is the up-and-coming market. finance is moving towards a crypto environment. How do we bring that to a Web2 environment? It's not only a question of user experience, but it's also accessibility to finance, right? A lot of players want to play. I don't know if anybody here works in the casino or platform or payment space. Today, I'm talking about 2024, payments in the gaming industry have become a nightmare. So blending Web 2 and Web 3 isn't just about creating features, but it's also about coming over obstacles. And payments are an obstacle. Decline rates are higher than they've ever been in the gaming market. Taking advantage of those features is ultimately where Web 2 and Web 3 come together. But in saying that, any more questions before I close off?
We have, yes, it works. Okay.
Thank you. So congratulations, excellent presentation. I really enjoyed it. I'm a financial regulator, but on the fintech side, regulating crypto. And I really enjoyed the presentation. And also, in my past life, I used to be quality assurance for code for a bingo company in the UK. I really like the bit where if it's not broke, don't fix it, because you said a lot of things about integrating Web3 and decentralization, but it just creates possible more points of failure along the way. And from my experience, players also feel cheated if the game, you not only lose, but it throws an error and you actually can see yourself lose. And you have to comp them again and so on. So on the regulatory point, I'm not in the gaming regulation anymore, thank God. But it is getting more complicated because a fair outcome for customers and explainability, the more technology you put in and the more regulators cannot understand what's happening, as in, okay, there's a policy, but now it's decentralized, so something can be voted in a different direction. Do you see at one point that we say, okay, there's a lot of fancy technology we could use, but actually, a bit like the metaverse, let it die by the wayside, and we really don't fix it? Because I see a lot of like, oh, this is the new thing, it doesn't work for us. Especially you mentioned banks. If you think it's a nightmare, just banks and gaming, put in crypto in between, and you have 3 times the nightmare, because most banks, as soon as you mention there's a crypto step somewhere, they're like, we don't touch it. Because banks can lose, for example, access to SWIFT or access to corresponding banks. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, look, the goal of crypto in many cases is to kind of bank the unbankable, right? That's a term we had back in the day. It's a very important thing to understand why banks don't want to touch this market. And I get it. I mean, I'm not a skeptic. I know that especially in the fintech market, you need to be careful. It's simply the anonymous layer that creates an issue. So there's major differences between regulators today. The difference between SOW and SOF, right? Basically, you're saying, where does your money come from, or where does that money come from? The problem with the crypto space today is when you're looking at larger transactions and financial institutions, then you can't define where those particular funds come from. And I know someone's going to put up their hand and say, well, you can see the history, but it's anonymous. And a bank's going to be like, I don't know that that didn't come from some terrorist cell in the Middle East. You don't know because the record is anonymous. That's the whole issue, why banks have to stay away from that market. So what we're trying to do is take the benefits of the crypto space and pull them in with a traditional platform. Why does it work? Because a regulator can look at my platform, can say, okay, these transactions are clear. Even though they were crypto, they didn't go into a red flag space, and we verified the owner of that individual. So to answer your question is, the regulators will always be tough on anything that's anonymous, right? The whole point of a regulator is knowing, taking a copy of your database and viewing it whenever they want. I mean, we've seen huge changes in Curaçao today. You know, the GCB is becoming a lot more, let's call it, a big brother than it was, 5 years ago. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. It protects the players at the end of the day. But there's always going to be a gap between a regulator or an authority and a payment institution that supports anonymous payments. So this is why regulators will never accept it. I mean, I think the point of a government is to know, not to know and control, but that's one of their remits. So basically, to answer your question, I think there are certain steps that can be taken in a regulatory sandbox, like if you can use crypto and prove who owns, let's say, 3 steps away, then you're creating the same requirements as any other SWIFT or SEPA transaction. But it's the anonymous part that keeps regulators away from the crypto space. Does that answer? Cool. Okay, guys, unfortunately I'm over, but if there's anyone else who has any other questions, before I jump off, let me know. Fantastic. Okay, thank you so much, and have a great last day of Sigma.